Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a bit about the Boston Celtics. Over the last half decade or so, they've been a consistent force in the Eastern Conference pretty much every single year. They have made a number of conference finals in this Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown era that they're currently in. They made an NBA Finals back in 2022 against the Golden State Warriors, where ultimately they fell short. They almost went back to the finals. This year would have been their back-to-back seasons, but they lost in a very roller coaster ride Eastern Conference Finals, where they went down 0-3, brought it all the way back to tied up 3-3 with Derek White's miracle game winner in Game 6 in Miami, and then got blown out in Game 7 and completely ruined all of the drama right then and there. So it's been an eventful time for the Celtics over this recent stretch, but they haven't lifted the Larry O'Brien trophy. They haven't been able to get there and win that title. They've gotten really close a number of times, but just haven't gotten quite all the way to the destination. However, as I look at this team right now, the roster that they've built, the high-end talent, the great role players, the new addition of Kristaps Porzingis, to me, the Celtics are pretty clearly right now, as I'm recording this on July 22nd, maybe there's a big trade that changes my opinion later, but right now I think the Celtics are pretty clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference, incredibly well constructed, and I think they're right up there with the Denver Nuggets in the conversation for best team in the entire league. I love the way that they've set themselves up. I think not enough people are talking about just how good this roster is and how great they can be this upcoming season. So I wanted to go ahead and make this video just kind of rambling and elaborating on why I like this Celtics team so much, why I think some people are sleeping on them, and ultimately why they can not just win the East, but win the whole thing. When we talk about Boston, it of course all starts with the Jays. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, their duo of all NBA guys out there in Boston. One of the best duos in the league over really the entire time that they've played together. I mean, the first season that they were together, when Jason Tatum was a rookie, they pushed LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers to 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, that wasn't a great Cavs team, but they were still going up against LeBron James as really young players. The fact that they got that far even in the first place, never mind pushing that series as far as they did, was very impressive. And now we fast forward to 2023, and they're both pretty accomplished. As I mentioned, multiple-time All-Stars for each of them. Jason Tatum has been All-NBA a number of times. He was All-NBA first team last season and this past one. Jaylen Brown just made his first one, making him eligible for a 5-year, roughly $290 million contract extension, which is a ton of money and a big topic of debate on NBA Twitter right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it was a great season from him. He's earned the right to potentially get that contract. This is an amazing duo, and to be honest, I think both guys in this duo have become somewhat underrated. Let's start with Jason Tatum, who is the best player in this team. In my opinion, he's very firmly a top 10 player in this league. He just averaged over 30 points per game. He played good defense the entire season, was an MVP candidate. In fact, he was leading the MVP race for like the first month and a half, maybe even up to 2 months. I don't remember the exact timeline, but for a little while, it was like Jason Tatum might end up winning this thing, and he ended up falling a bit down in the race behind Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid, who ended up winning it, but still made All-NBA first team like I mentioned. Tatum was the Celtics' best player on their playoff run, having some really big-time moments. There were some ups and downs as well, as was the case with the Celtics, their entire playoff run as a team, but in the biggest moments, Jason Tatum usually delivered, and that's kind of the way he's been his entire career. And every single offseason, he's gotten better and better. He continues to elevate his game. He isn't even yet to the point where most players hit their prime around 27, 28 years old. We have definitely not seen the best version of Jason Tatum. I fully expect him to come into this next season better than he was, especially when you take a look at the talent that's around him. I think this is a roster that's very well optimized to help Tatum be successful and be the best version of himself. I wouldn't be surprised if Tatum was the MVP this upcoming season. I think he's going to win one at some point. He just finished top 4. If he replicates a similar season with the level of team success that I think we could see from the Celtics, Tatum is probably my dark horse to go ahead and win the award. A lot of people aren't going to like that. They're going to say there's no way Jason Tatum can win an MVP, but I just want to go ahead and put it out there in case it does end up happening, so you know that you heard it here first. Meanwhile, Jaylen Brown is going to get that extension that we talked about earlier. I think he's deserving of getting a big payday from the Celtics. He's been their second best player on a number of these conference finals teams, on the finals team where in that series, more games than not, he was their best player. JB is really good. Yes, he has his faults. Dribbling left, not really an option for him as much. The handle is a bit loose. There were turnover issues. Those are all concerns. But there are also things that Jaylen Brown can continue to work on, and he still does so many things well. He's a great complementary piece alongside Jason Tatum. Again, he's been an all-star. He was just an all-NBA second-team guy in an incredibly stacked and talented NBA. JB is really good. I feel like people get caught up a little bit in the recency bias of when guys struggle in the playoffs, where obviously that's the most important spot. You want to see players be their best. But you also have to take into account what the guy did the entire season. You can't just rely on a smaller sample size. And Jaylen Brown has had great playoffs before. This wasn't his only playoff run. He's had good playoff performances prior to this. And he's another player that still is not yet there at his prime. I think he can get better. I think he will get better. And this duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is consistently one of the best in the league. It feels like another instance where people are trying to split them up, even though they've been wildly successful together. And I think that these two guys can be the best players on a championship team, and they have the capability to do so this upcoming season, as they'll probably get better like they have basically every year of their careers. In addition to their own development, another big reason why I think this will be a career year for both of these guys is the addition of Kristaps Porzingis to the equation. They now have a third all-star that really fits their play style as well. They've had a couple of guys in the past, like Kemba Walker, Kyrie Irving was there for a little bit too, but those guys weren't here when these two players were becoming all-star, all-NBA caliber guys. This is the first time where they've had both these players at their peaks and added an all-star alongside them. And like I said, I think Porzingis is such a great fit alongside this duo and in this team in general. He gives them another incredible offensive option for when they have those times where the offense stagnates, like we've seen with the Celtics at times where it falls into a little bit of iso ball. Jason Tatum takes a shot, Jaylen Brown takes a shot, maybe Marcus Smart takes a shot, and they just kind of rotate. There have been multiple moments where the Celtics will be really up in a game, they'll kind of fall behind a little bit, and it'll get really close within the final few minutes, and it's like they just forget what got them that lead that they had a little while ago in the first place. I think adding that reliable third option in Porzingis, who might have just had the best season of his career, is really going to help that offense figure itself out, create a lot more fluidity. He can create his own shot, which is also a problem for the Celtics at times. If Tatum or Brown don't have it going, they can now go to a third all-star caliber player to go ahead and get them some buckets. He also adds a new dimension to their offense through the post. They really haven't had a player alongside this duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown that can consistently get some buckets out of the post. It's been mostly creation on the perimeter. Al Horford can knock down some shots down low. He can do a little bit. But Porzingis had an incredibly underrated postseason this past year. I don't think many people think of him as a post player. They just think of the guy that is 7 foot that can knock down deep threes, which is also huge for this team, giving them another spacing option. But Porzingis can operate out of there. He's a mismatch with his height. And if he creates those double teams, if teams have to send a little bit of extra pressure, it leaves some of the shooters that the Celtics have open, maybe even like Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. His spacing in the front court's also going to be pretty big. Al Horford had a great season knocking down threes in the regular season, but when they got to the playoffs, his three-point shot kind of dipped. Robert Williams has never had that in his bag, so now they have someone who has been pretty reliable over the course of his career at knocking down threes, and like I mentioned earlier, he can shoot from like the hash mark, the half-court logo at times and still knock them down. It's a big boost to this team. They were the number 2 offense in the league this past season, and just add a guy who averaged like 23 points per game and is a 7-footer that can post up, that can knock down mid-range jumpers, play well off the other 2 guys, knock down deep threes. I think there's a good chance the Celtics team is the number 1 offense in the league this upcoming season. If not, again, number 2, number 3. They're going to be in that top 5. And being a top 5 offense is huge, not to mention the fact that this past season, they were also a top 2 defense. They finished number 2 in both these categories, and Porzingis is going to help the defense as well. They haven't really had a legit 7-foot defensive guy like Porzingis before on this team. He can block some shots, deter guys away from the rim, just gives them a presence with a lot of height there down low in the paint, which is a new dimension to this team's defense. And between him, Al Horford, and Robert Williams, you're not going to find many better defensive trios in a front court out there across the entire league at the moment. So being the number 2 defense, I think that can get better as well. There's a real chance that they compete to be the number 1 offense and number 1 defense this upcoming season with the addition of Kristaps Porzingis and the rest of the other talent they have on this roster, such as Robert Williams, who, if he can stay healthy, which I will say is a big if, he's a game changer for Boston. He only played 35 games this past season, has only played 60-plus games once in his 5 seasons in the league, but when he is out there, he's one of the best defensive bigs in the entire NBA. I think he probably would have won Defensive Player of the Year over Marcus Smart back in 2022 if he didn't get injured to end the season. He was pretty clearly the front runner. Then he got injured and Marcus Smart kind of took that. I'm not saying Smart wasn't deserving, but I do believe that if Robert Williams stayed healthy, he probably would have won that award. And even though he didn't, you've got to remember that he was the front runner at one point. He has that type of defensive prowess. He works really well with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown too in actions as a screener, a pretty solid role man. His impact on the boards is huge for Boston too. Grabbed about 3 offensive rebounds per game this past season for them. Robert Williams is big for them. If he can just stay healthy, and you've got a front court of him, of Kristaps Porzingis, of Al Horford, who could also defend. He's really physical out there. He was huge for them guarding Embiid in the playoffs this past season. He can knock down some threes too. He's great working out of the high post, dribble handoffs, all those actions that the Celtics have run for years. Like, this front court trio is perfect. They play so many different roles. They're versatile, great defensively, offensively. It's stacked over there. We've also got to talk about the point guard spot, which had been manned by Marcus Smart for about 9 years, but he's no longer going to be there. Traded to the Grizzlies in that 3-team deal, which brought Porzingis over to the Celtics. It sucks that they had to give him up. I had a friend who's a Celtics fan who said that losing Marcus Smart felt like he was losing a family member because of how long he had been there. He was the leader, the heart and soul, the identity of the Celtics team, an instigator, a hustle guy, the type of player that any championship team wants to have and any opponent hates to go up against. He also always just seemed to hit the big shots when they counted the most. He could be 0 for 30 on a game and he would somehow knock down the highly contested 3 to tie things up with about 15 seconds to go. I don't know how he always did it, but it felt like he did. Part of me does wonder how that trade's going to impact them losing their leader, their identity of the team, a guy that if the Celtics were kind of going through a rough patch could speak up, be the voice and say, hey, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. It felt like that was typically his role out there on the court. So losing him, if they go through a rough patch this season, not having him, maybe that ends up taking a big toll. But from the basketball perspective, I think ultimately they'll probably survive because Derek White is ready to step in at the starting 1, and he's really good. He had kind of a breakout season this past year. If you just take a look at the numbers, you wouldn't think so, but his efficiency was the best it had ever been. The playmaking was really solid, one of the highest assist marks of his entire career. He went from being a pretty good defender to an all-defensive guy, making an all-defensive team. He had a phenomenal season, and now he's going to be the full-time starting point guard, which he showed a little bit of what he could do in that role this past year when Marcus Smart missed some time, allowing him to step into that spot as the Celtics PG. And he balled out from late January to mid-February when Marcus Smart was injured. Derek White averaged 20.1 points per game, 5.8 assists, 4.6 rebounds, while turning the ball over just 1.5 times a game and shooting 49% from the field and 43.6% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. He was incredible, and over 4 games towards the end of this stretch, they were also without Jaylen Brown, requiring more from him. And Derek White stepped up yet again. They were able to go 4-0 over that stretch. He won Player of the Week and averaged 24.5 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, and 7.5 assists, while shooting over 50-50-90 splits in that time period. He was phenomenal. Whenever they gave him the chance to step into the starting guard role, they said, hey, we need more from you because Smart's hurt, because Jaylen Brown's injured. Derek White did that. I mean, we saw what he could do too in clutch moments with his shot against the Miami Heat in Game 6. He makes those hustle plays. He's another guy like Marcus Smart who never gives up on a play, is going to give you consistent effort nonstop. He has shown that he can step up and help the Celtics win when given this expanded role. Now, of course, we haven't seen him do it over the course of an entire season, but I'm pretty confident he can somewhat replicate the elevated play he showed, and if he gets even slightly close to that impact that he had in those moments, I think they're going to be fine. They're going to be able to survive without Marcus Smart. I think Derek White can pretty cleanly step into that role. I think he will. And ultimately, as much as Marcus Smart's departure may end up hurting them off the court, I think on the court they're going to be fine because of Derek White. They've also got some great depth pieces beyond this core group of guys as well. Malcolm Brogdon just won 6th Man of the Year and wasn't great in the playoffs due to a shoulder injury, but if that's healed by the time the season rolls around, will probably again be one of the league's best bench guards. I think Peyton Pritchard could have a big year, probably getting an expanded role after not playing much this past season with the departure of Marcus Smart, so excited to see him get some more run. Sam Hauser is one of the best wing shooters in the league this past season, and also held up surprisingly well on the defensive end. O'Shea Brissett gives them a really physical wing type of player who plays a lot bigger than he is, and I think his three-point shot, which wasn't great this past season, will bounce back to more what it was in prior years where it was actually pretty solid. Jordan Wall showed a lot of really fun things in Summer League, not just showing some defensive intensity like he did did in college, but also showing some signs of knocking down outside shots, which is a big swing factor for his development. Delano Banton comes in as another guard option for them who adds a lot of size and gives them some versatility. I think it's a pretty solid grouping of guys, and if they want to add more depth, they've got their draft picks that they can use to make deals. We've seen Brad Stevens in the past is not afraid to make splashes if he has to, and I wouldn't be surprised if they make one or two more moves heading into the season that further solidifies this group. Overall, I just really like this team and what Boston's got going on. They could be, again, a top 2 offense and top 2 defense. I wouldn't even be surprised if they're fighting for the number 1 spot in both those categories when the season rolls around. I love what they've got over there in their 2 stars in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who I think can have the best seasons of their career this upcoming season. Even if it isn't the best on paper numbers-wise, it could be their most impactful. Kristaps Porzingis adds a whole new dimension to this team that I think will help them be a bit more successful and dynamic when the playoffs roll around. Their front court with KP, Robert Williams, and Al Horford gives them a lot of different looks that they can throw at other teams defensively and offensively. I will say worry a little bit about the injuries over there in the front court between KP and Robert Williams in particular, plus Al Horford getting older is a bit concerning. His injury concerns might start to ramp up over the course of the season, but if they stay healthy, it's an incredibly dynamic and dominant group. I think Derek White's going to step up in a big way at that spot. I like some of their depth. They have plenty of assets to make upgrades. I really like the Celtics team. I think they've built something over there in the East that is going to be the best squad out there, get a 1 seed, win the Eastern Conference, and be incredibly dangerous. Any single given night could win the NBA Finals. This might be the year that they get over the hump. I don't know if it's just me that's buying this much into the Celtics. I'm assuming not. I know a lot of people really like the KP trade when it happened for Boston. I've talked to a couple of my friends who also make NBA content, and they thought that move is really going to elevate this team. I'd love to hear what y'all have to think about the Celtics. Let me know in the comment section below. Where do you think they finish in the standings? Do you think they can win 60 games like I do? Do you think that I'm a little bit overrating them? Do you have concerns about their injuries? Do you agree that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are a bit underrated and a phenomenal duo? All that stuff, I'd love to hear your opinions, as always, in the comments below. Also, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Helps the channel out a ton. I appreciate y'all watching. If there's any other teams that you want to see me make breakdowns of, like I've said in my past few team breakdowns, let me know in the comments. I'd love to go ahead and break down almost all the teams, if possible, over the course of this summer. But for right now, again, appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.